The massive Vorthan war fleet stretched across the void like a steel nightmare. Thousands of ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had turned entire star systems into graveyards. At the center of this armada, the flagship Dark Sovereign cut through space like a giant predator, hunting its next meal. Admiral Kravex pressed his clawed hands against the viewing window, watching the planet below die in slow motion. Massive. Cities that had stood for centuries crumbled under the relentless bombardment of quantum disruptor beams. Purple energy cascaded across the planet's surface, turning oceans into steam and mountains into glass. The defense satellites that had tried to protect this world now drifted as twisted metal, their crews vaporized in seconds. "Another world claims to have impenetrable defenses," Commander Thane said from his position at the tactical console. His voice carried the same bored tone of someone reading yesterday's weather report. Their planetary shield lasted exactly 2 hours and 43 minutes, shorter than the last 3 worlds. Kravex's 4 yellow eyes tracked the destruction below with cold satisfaction. The Zalarian civilization had boasted about their military might for decades, sending threatening messages across subspace about their unstoppable fleet. Now their homeworld burned like a dying star, and their vaunted armada floated in pieces around their moon. "Status report on the ground assault," Kravex commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge. "Resistance has collapsed completely, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Vex from the communications station. "The surviving Zalarians are already broadcasting surrender messages. They're offering to hand over their entire industrial capacity and join the Empire willingly." The bridge crew erupted in clicking sounds that passed for laughter among the Vorthans. It was always the same pattern. First came the brave speeches about resistance and freedom. Then came the desperate last stands that lasted mere hours. Finally came the pathetic begging and unconditional surrender. 17 worlds in 62 standard days, Kravex mused, walking back to his command throne. The massive chair was carved from the fossilized remains of the last creature to oppose the Vorthan Empire on their homeworld. "Our ancestors would be proud of this pace of conquest." Commander Thane pulled up the tactical display, showing their recent victories. Each conquered world glowed red on the holographic map, spreading like an infection across this sector of the galaxy. The hegemony of Kresh had fallen in 18 hours. The proud warrior clans of Viridian Prime had lasted exactly 1 day before. Their orbital fortresses became floating scrap metal. The technologically advanced Synthesis Collective, with their quantum computers and energy beings, had managed to hold out for nearly 30 hours before their digital consciousness was corrupted by Vorthan cyber warfare. "The quantum disruptor technology continues to prove unstoppable," Thane observed, manipulating the holographic display to show combat footage from their recent battles. "Every species we encounter relies on energy shields for protection. When our disruptors tear apart their quantum coherence fields, their ships become as vulnerable as paper boats in a hurricane." The footage showed Vorthan heavy cruisers unleashing devastating barrages against enemy fleets. The quantum disruptors didn't just destroy enemy vessels, they unraveled the basic atomic bonds that held matter together. Ships didn't explode in traditional fire and debris. Instead, they simply dissolved into clouds of fundamental particles, their crews dying so quickly they didn't even have time to scream. "What's our next target?" asked Navigation Officer Krex, his 3-fingered hands dancing over the star charts. Krevex studied the galactic map with interest. Most of the major civilizations in this region had already fallen or fled deeper into unexplored space. Only a few scattered worlds remained, most of them primitive backwater planets that barely deserved the Empire's attention. "Intelligence has identified an interesting prospect," Kravex said, activating a new section of the map. "A system called Sol, inhabited by a species that calls themselves humans. According to our scouts, they've only recently developed hyperspace technology, still using chemical rockets for most of their space travel." The bridge crew leaned forward with renewed interest. Primitive species often provided the most entertaining conquests. Their crude weapons and desperate tactics made for amusing target practice. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" Commander Thane asked. "Laughably primitive," Kravex replied, pulling up the intelligence reports. They're still fighting wars on their own planet with kinetic weapons and chemical explosives. Their space fleet consists of maybe 24 ships, most of them converted cargo vessels. They don't even have proper energy shields. The clicking laughter filled the bridge again. A species without energy shields facing quantum disruptors would be like insects facing a solar flare. They do have one interesting characteristic, Kravex continued, scrolling through the reports. Intelligence suggests they're unusually aggressive for such a primitive species. They've been broadcasting warnings to stay away from their system. Warnings. Lieutenant Vex's mandibles clicked with amusement. A species that still uses metal projectiles is threatening the Vorthan Empire. Set course for the Sol system, Kravex ordered, settling back into his throne. Signal the fleet to maintain standard formation. This should be over quickly. As the massive armada changed course, the crew began their usual pre-conquest preparations. Weapons technicians calibrated the quantum disruptors for maximum psychological impact. The ground assault divisions prepared their terror weapons and pacification protocols. The administrative corps began drafting the standard surrender documents and resource extraction quotas. Nobody aboard the Dark Sovereign suspected they were flying toward the end of their unstoppable conquest. The Vortan Armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a swarm of metallic locusts. 3,000 warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the dark energy that had terrorized 17 worlds. The Dark Sovereign led the fleet, its massive bulk casting shadows across the smaller cruisers and destroyers that flanked it on all sides. Admiral Kravex stood on his bridge, 4 eyes gleaming with anticipation as the tactical displays came alive. The Sol system spread before them like a cosmic map, with 9 planets orbiting a yellow star. Intelligence reports had been accurate. This was clearly a primitive civilization. Ancient radio signals leaked from the 3rd planet, carrying crude entertainment broadcasts and chaotic news reports. Long-range sensors are detecting minimal space traffic, reported Lieutenant Vex, her claws clicking across the sensor controls. A few automated probes, some primitive space stations, and what appears to be a small mining operation near the 4th planet. Commander Thane studied the readings with amusement. Their largest vessel appears to be some kind of cargo hauler. Energy output suggests they're still using fusion reactors instead of quantum cores. The bridge crew erupted in their characteristic clicking laughter. Fusion reactors were technology the Vorthans had abandoned centuries ago, like stone tools or animal transportation. Any species still dependent on such crude power sources would pose no threat whatsoever. Admiral, the communications officer called out, "We're receiving a transmission from the inner system." "Put it through," Kravex ordered, settling back in his throne to enjoy what would undoubtedly be desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, a calm human voice filled the bridge. "Attention Vorthan Fleet. This is Captain Lee Minho of the United Earth. Ship Resilient. You are entering human space without permission. Turn your ships around and leave immediately." The silence on the bridge lasted exactly 3 seconds before the entire crew burst into hysterical clicking. Several officers actually fell from their stations, overwhelmed by the absurdity of the situation. A primitive species was ordering the mighty Vorthan Empire to retreat. Did he just... Commander Thane gasped between clicks. Did he just threaten us? Kravex wiped moisture from his 4 eyes, struggling to control his laughter. Communications. Respond to this human. Tell him we are the Vorthan Empire, conquerors of 17 worlds, and that his species has exactly 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. Message sent, Admiral. The response came back within minutes, delivered in the same unnervingly calm tone. Captain Lee Minho responding, "We are not interested in surrender. You have been warned. Leave now." Through the main viewing screen, a single point of light separated itself from the inner system and began approaching their position. The tactical display identified it as a human vessel moving at speeds that barely qualified as faster-than-light travel. "Sensors confirm it's a single ship," Lieutenant Vex reported, struggling to keep the amusement out of her voice. "Approximately 800 meters long, minimal energy signature. No quantum shielding detected." "One ship," Thane repeated slowly. as if the words made no sense. They're sending one ship against 3,000. The human vessel continued its approach with steady determination. As it drew closer, the Vorthon sensors revealed more details about their opponent. The ship's hull appeared to be constructed from primitive metal alloys, with angular designs. That looked clunky compared to the sleek curves of Vorthon technology. Weapon ports were visible along its sides, but energy readings suggested they were simple kinetic weapons rather than advanced energy systems. "It's like watching a child wave a stick at a forest fire," observed Navigation Officer Krex. The ship designated UES Resilient took up position directly between the Vorton fleet and the inner planets. Despite being outnumbered 3,000 to 1, it showed no signs of retreat or hesitation. "Final warning transmission coming through," the communications officer announced. Captain Lee's voice returned, still maintaining that unsettling composure. "This is your last chance. Turn around and leave. We don't want to fight you, but we will defend our home." Kravex had heard enough. This primitive species clearly didn't understand the reality of their situation. Perhaps a demonstration would help them grasp the futility of resistance. "Target the human vessel," he commanded. "Single disruptor burst. Let's show them what real power looks like." The weapons officer's claws danced over his controls. Quantum disruptor charged and ready. "Admiral, fire!" A brilliant purple beam lanced out from the Dark Sovereign, crossing the distance between the ships in an instant. The quantum disruptor struck the Resilient with enough concentrated energy to vaporize a city block. The beam was designed to tear apart the quantum bonds that held matter together, reducing any target to its component atoms. The crew watched their displays eagerly, waiting for the familiar sight of expanding debris and dissipating energy. The humans would learn quickly. That resistance was pointless. Instead, something impossible happened. The purple energy struck the human ship and simply stopped. The quantum disruptor beam, which had never failed to destroy its target, spread harmlessly across the Resilient's hull like water hitting stone. When the energy dissipated, the human vessel sat completely unchanged, not even a scorch mark visible on its metal surface. The bridge fell absolutely silent. "Sensor malfunction?" Kravex asked quietly. "All systems showing normal operation," Lieutenant Vex replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Weapon malfunction. Disruptor fired at full power. All energy readings normal." Commander Thane stared at his tactical display as if it had betrayed him. "The beam hit the target directly. I watched it strike their hull." "Then why?" Kravex's voice grew dangerously low. "Is that ship still intact?" Before anyone could answer, Captain Lee's voice crackled through the communications again, still maintaining that infuriating, calm tone. "That was your demonstration. Now here's ours." Commander Thane's 4 hands trembled as he ran diagnostic after diagnostic on his weapons systems. Every reading came back the same. The quantum disruptor had fired perfectly, delivering enough energy to atomize an asteroid. Yet the human ship floated in space without so much as a dent in its hull. "Run full spectrum analysis," Admiral Kravex ordered, his voice tight with confusion. "I want to know what kind of shielding technology they're using." Lieutenant Vex's claws clicked frantically across her sensor controls. "Admiral, this is impossible. The energy readings show our disruptor beam made contact with their hull, but there's no energy shield, no deflector field, nothing that should have stopped our weapons." Captain Lee's voice cut through their confusion like a blade. "You look surprised, Admiral Kravex. Did you really think the entire galaxy would just roll over and die for you?" Kravex leaned forward in his throne, his 4 eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about, human?" "3 years ago, your fleet destroyed the hegemony of Kresh." Lee's voice remained steady, almost conversational. "Fortunately for us, not every ship in their fleet was completely vaporized. We recovered enough wreckage to reverse engineer your quantum disruptor technology." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Reverse engineer Vorthon technology? These primitives barely understood fusion power. "You're lying," Thane snarled. "Your species lacks the scientific knowledge to understand quantum mechanics at that level." Lee's laugh was surprisingly warm. "You know what they say about assumptions. Commander, 3 years is a long time when your entire species is working toward the same goal. Our best scientists from every nation collaborated. We built quantum computers specifically to model your disruptor beams. We tested thousands of materials and energy combinations. The tactical display showed the human ship rotating slowly, bringing different sections of its hull into view. Now that they were looking closely, the Vorthans could see that the metal wasn't quite what they'd initially thought. Strange patterns covered the surface, geometric designs that seemed to shift and flow like living circuits. The hull itself is embedded with quantum coherence fields, Lee continued, his tone taking on the quality of a teacher explaining something to slow students. Your disruptors work by breaking apart quantum bonds. Our armor doesn't try to stop that process. It redirects it. Every joule of energy you shoot at us gets absorbed and channeled into our power systems. Lieutenant Vex's voice cracked with disbelief. They're using our own weapons to charge their ship. Impossible, Kravex repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. Deep in his mind, a cold realization was beginning to take hold. If the humans had truly mastered quantum disruptor technology, then the Vorthan Empire's greatest advantage had just become worthless. I'll prove it's impossible, Thane growled, his pride wounded by the suggestion that primitives had outsmarted Vorthan science. All ships, Battle Formation Delta, concentrate fire on that single vessel. 20 Vorthan heavy cruisers moved into attack position, their hulls bristling with weapons. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a continent. Together, they represented the concentrated military might that had brought 17 civilizations to their knees. Full attack pattern, Thane commanded. Quantum disruptors, plasma cannons, particle beam arrays, everything we have. The space around the Resilient erupted into a storm of destruction. Purple quantum disruptor beams lanced out from multiple angles, followed by streams of superheated plasma and focused particle beams. The energy expenditure was enormous, enough to power a small star system for a year. The human ship sat motionless in the center of the firestorm, absorbing punishment that should have reduced it to its component atoms. The geometric patterns on its hull began to glow with absorbed energy, pulsing in rhythm with each incoming shot. Energy readings are off the charts, Vex reported, her voice filled with awe. Their hull is actually getting stronger. The quantum fields are using our weapons fire to reinforce their molecular structure. The barrage continued for 30 seconds before Thane finally ordered a ceasefire. The Vorthan ships had expended nearly 20% of their ammunition in a single sustained attack. As the energy storm dissipated, the Resilient remained exactly where it had been, completely undamaged. Our turn, Captain Lee announced. The human ship's weapon ports opened with mechanical precision. Instead of the energy weapons the Vorthans expected, they revealed something far more primitive and infinitely more terrifying. Magnetic rail. Cannons, they're using kinetic weapons? Thane laughed nervously. Chunks of metal. Our shields will... The rail cannons fired. Hypervelocity projectiles erupted from the Resilient at a significant fraction of light speed. The rounds were simple tungsten cores, no bigger than a human fist, but they carried the momentum of freight trains. They crossed the distance to the Vorthan ships in microseconds. The first projectile struck the heavy cruiser, Bone Crusher, directly. Amidships, the Vorthan quantum shields designed to stop energy weapons offered no resistance to solid matter traveling at relativistic speeds. The tungsten core punched through the shield generators, the armor plating, and the ship's reactor core in a single devastating impact. The Bone Crusher didn't explode, it simply came apart. The kinetic energy transferred through its structure like a shock wave, tearing apart molecular bonds and reducing the 800-meter warship to an expanding cloud of superheated debris. 4 more rail cannon rounds found their targets with surgical precision. The cruisers, Void Render, Death's Edge, Dark Talon, and Stellar Doom suffered identical fates. One moment they were proud warships of the Vorthan fleet. The next, they were expanding spheres of plasma and twisted metal. The bridge of the Dark Sovereign erupted in chaos. Alarm klaxons wailed as crew members struggled to process what they'd just witnessed. 5 heavy cruisers, ships that had participated in the conquest of entire star systems, had been destroyed in less than 10 seconds by primitive kinetic weapons. Impossible, Kravex whispered, but the word had lost all meaning. The tactical display showed the debris fields where his ships had been, glowing clouds of vaporized metal that had once been the pride of the Vorthan Navy. Captain Lee's voice returned, still maintaining that unsettling calm. Our weapons are crude compared to yours, Admiral, but sometimes crude is exactly what works. Your shields stop energy. They don't stop matter. Commander Thane stared at his readings in horror. The kinetic energy from those impacts, it's impossible to generate that much acceleration with primitive technology. Not primitive, Lee corrected. Focused. We spent 3 years perfecting these rail cannons, superconducting magnetic coils, quantum-stabilized projectiles, and enough electrical power to light up a continent. All of it powered by the energy your own weapons are feeding us. The realization hit Kravex like a physical blow. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were using Vorthan technology against them. Every shot the Empire fired made the human ship stronger and more dangerous. For the first time in his career, Admiral Kravex felt something he'd never experienced before. Fear. The tactical display on the Dark Sovereign suddenly exploded with warning signals. Red dots appeared across the entire system, like stars being born in fast forward. Lieutenant Vex's voice rose to a panicked shriek as her sensors struggled to process the impossible readings. Admiral, energy signatures are spiking everywhere. Behind the fourth planet in the asteroid belt near the gas giants, there are ships everywhere. Commander Thane's 4 eyes darted between displays as space itself seemed to come alive around them. What had appeared to be empty void moments before now rippled with distortion fields as cloaking systems deactivated. The seemingly barren asteroid belt revealed itself to be crawling with hidden vessels. The massive gas giants, which sensors had shown as lifeless, suddenly bloomed with the heat signatures of entire fleets. Stealth technology, Kravex breathed, his voice barely audible over the chaos erupting across his bridge. They've been here the entire time. The first human ships to decloak were massive dreadnoughts that had been hiding in the shadow of Jupiter's largest moon. These weren't the crude vessels intelligence had described. They were sleek predators built for war, their hulls covered in the same quantum-absorbing patterns as the Resilient. Each one was easily the size of a Vorthan heavy cruiser, bristling with rail cannon arrays and missile tubes. Uicus Thunder decloaking and moving to attack position, a calm female voice announced across the communication channels. Captain Park Ji-won's destroyer emerged from behind an asteroid, its weapons already charging. All Vorthan vessels you are now surrounded. Surrender immediately. More voices joined the chorus as human ships revealed themselves throughout the system. Captain Kim Minji aboard the heavy cruiser. Thunderbolt spoke from her position near Saturn's rings. You were given multiple chances to leave peacefully. You chose to ignore our warnings. The scope of the ambush became clear as hundreds of human vessels dropped their stealth fields. They had been positioned with mathematical precision throughout the solar system, creating overlapping fields of fire that left no escape routes. Fast attack craft emerged from the asteroid belt like metal hornets. Destroyers uncloaked from behind the moons of gas giants. Heavy cruisers materialized from positions that had seemed empty moments before. How many ships? Kravex demanded, his voice cracking with stress. Still counting, Admiral, Vex replied, her claws clicking frantically across her controls. Over 400 confirmed contacts, with more decloaking every second. They're using some kind of advanced stealth technology we've never encountered. Commander Thane studied the tactical display with growing horror. The human fleet wasn't just large, it was perfectly coordinated. Each ship had taken position to create maximum tactical advantage while eliminating any possibility of Vorthan escape. This wasn't a desperate last stand by a primitive species. This was a masterfully planned military operation. The stealth technology appears to be quantum-based, Lieutenant Vex reported. They're using the same scientific principles as their hull armor, but reversed. Instead of absorbing energy, they're bending it around their ships. Captain Lee's voice returned from the Resilient, still maintaining that infuriating calm tone. Did you really think we'd face your fleet with a single ship, Admiral? That would be as foolish as attacking an entire star system with no intelligence about its defenses. The human formations moved with practiced precision, closing the tactical. Noose around the Vorthan armada. Fast destroyers raced ahead to cut off escape routes, while heavy cruisers moved into bombardment positions. The humans had clearly studied Vorthan battle tactics extensively, positioning their forces to counter every standard Imperial maneuver. "They've been planning this for months," Thane whispered, studying the enemy movements. Every ship position, every tactical formation, they knew exactly how we'd approach their system. 3 years, Captain Lee corrected, somehow overhearing the conversation. "We've had 3 years to prepare for your arrival. 3 years to study your tactics from the combat records of your victims. 3 years to build these ships and train their crews." A new voice joined the communications. Captain Cho Hyunwoo from the battleship Defiance. "Vorthan fleet, cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that attempts to flee or fight will be destroyed." The threat wasn't empty. As if to demonstrate their capabilities, a squadron of human destroyers opened fire on a Vorthan light cruiser that had tried to break formation. Hypervelocity rounds from their rail cannons struck the ship's engines, crippling it instantly without destroying it completely. The precision was surgical. They had disabled the vessel without killing its crew. "They're not just trying to destroy us," Thane observed with grudging respect. "They're trying to capture our ships intact." More human vessels continued to decloak. Throughout the system, support ships emerged from hiding spots near the outer planets, their hulls modified with equipment the Vorthans didn't recognize. Electronic warfare vessels appeared near the communication relay stations, their jamming arrays already disrupting Vorthan communications with the Empire. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're losing contact with Imperial Command. The humans are jamming all subspace frequencies." Captain Kim Minji's voice cut through the static. "We're not jamming your communications, Admiral. We're simply ensuring that no distress calls leave this system until our business is concluded." The tactical situation had become impossible. The Vorthan fleet, which had seemed overwhelmingly powerful when facing a single human ship, now found itself outnumbered and outgunned. Every direction showed human vessels moving into attack position, their quantum-resistant armor rendering. "Vorthan weapons useless. The quantum disruptors are completely ineffective," the weapons officer reported. "Every shot we fire just makes their ships stronger. And their kinetic weapons cut through our shields like they don't exist," Thane added. Grimly, Captain Lee's voice returned one final time. "Admiral Kravex, you have 60 seconds to order your fleet to stand down. After that, we'll assume you've chosen to fight, and we'll respond accordingly." Kravex looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were warriors who had conquered 17 worlds without serious opposition. Now they sat in stunned silence, watching their instruments track hundreds of enemy vessels that could destroy them at will. The countdown had begun, and for the first time in Vorthan history, their mighty armada faced an enemy they couldn't defeat. Admiral Kravex never gave the order to surrender. Pride and 3 centuries of unbroken conquest wouldn't let him speak the words. Instead, he watched in horrified silence as his mighty armada was systematically torn apart by an enemy that shouldn't have existed. The battle began when Commander Thane, driven by desperation, ordered a full-scale assault. "All ships, emergency combat formation. Target their largest vessels first." The Vorthan fleet, despite being surrounded, still numbered nearly 3,000 ships. Their quantum disruptors opened fire in a coordinated barrage that should have vaporized entire human squadrons. Purple energy beams crisscrossed space like deadly lightning, converging on the human vessels from every angle. The result was spectacular and terrifying. Every quantum disruptor beam was absorbed harmlessly by the human ship's quantum-resistant armor. Instead of taking damage, the human vessels began glowing brighter as their power systems fed on the incoming energy. The geometric patterns on their hulls pulsed with increasing intensity, like heartbeats growing stronger. "Sir, their energy output is increasing with every shot we fire," Lieutenant Vex reported, her voice trembling. "We're literally making them more powerful." Captain Lee's voice cut through the chaos with chilling calm. "Thank you for the power boost, Admiral. Human fleet, you are cleared to engage." The response was immediate and devastating. Hundreds of human ships opened fire simultaneously with their rail cannons. The hypervelocity tungsten rounds crossed space at relativistic speeds, striking Vorthan vessels with the force of small meteors. Unlike energy weapons, there was no defense against solid matter traveling at such incredible velocity. The heavy cruiser, Death's Shadow, was the first to die. A single rail cannon round punched through its quantum shields, its armor plating, and its reactor core in one clean strike. The ship's fusion reactor went critical, creating a brief new star that consumed everything within a kilometer radius. The destroyer, Void Stalker, tried to flee, its engines burning at maximum power. Captain Park Ji-won's ship, Thunder, tracked it effortlessly, firing a precise burst that severed the destroyer's engine section from its hull. The crew compartments tumbled through space, powerless but intact. The humans were still trying to minimize casualties, even in the heat of battle. "They're not just destroying us," Thane observed with bitter admiration. "They're surgically dismantling our fleet." Captain Kim Minji's cruiser, Thunderbolt, demonstrated this precision by crippling 6 Vorthan ships in rapid succession. Her rail cannons targeted engine systems and weapon arrays, leaving the vessels helpless, but allowing the crews to survive. It was a level of accuracy that spoke to years of preparation and training. The battle turned into a nightmare for the Vorthans. Their most advanced weapons were useless, while human kinetic weapons carved through their defenses like knives through paper. Worse still, every Vorthan ship that tried to escape found human vessels already positioned to block their retreat. "Routes? How are they coordinating so perfectly?" Kravex demanded, watching his tactical display fill with red indicators marking destroyed or disabled ships. "Their communication systems are quantum encrypted," the communications officer reported. "We can't jam them or intercept them. It's like they're sharing a single mind across hundreds of ships." Captain Cho Hyun-woo's battleship, Defiance, proved the point by leading a coordinated strike against a formation of 20 Vorthan cruisers. The human ships moved in perfect synchronization, their rail cannons firing in sequence to create overlapping fields of destruction. The Vorthan formation simply ceased to exist, replaced by expanding clouds of debris and escaping atmosphere. As the minutes ticked by, the scope of the disaster became clear. The Vorthan Empire's invincible armada was being systematically destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Every tactical advantage they had relied on for centuries had been turned against them. "Admiral," Lieutenant Vex's voice was barely audible, "we've lost over 2,000 ships. The fleet is requesting permission to retreat." Kravex looked at his tactical display, where the red dots marking destroyed Vorthan vessels far outnumbered the remaining blue ones. In 47 minutes, the humans had accomplished what no other species had managed in 3 centuries. They had broken the Vorthan war machine. "All ships," he finally spoke, his voice hollow with defeat. "Emergency hyperspace jump. Retreat. To Imperial space immediately." The surviving Vorthan vessels, less than a quarter of the original armada, began their desperate flight. Their hyperspace drives spun up to maximum power, tearing rifts in space-time that would carry them away from this nightmare. Captain Lee's voice followed them one last time. "Admiral Kravex, you're free to go. Tell your people what happened here. Tell them that humans don't seek conquest, but we will defend ourselves and our allies with everything we have." As the Dark Sovereign limped into hyperspace, its hull scarred and engines failing, Kravex realized the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The age of easy conquest was over. On Earth, Admiral Choi Soon-ho stood in the command center beneath the Korean peninsula, watching the last Vorthan ships disappear from his displays. Around him, technicians monitored communication channels that were lighting up with messages from across the galaxy. "Sir," his aide Captain Yoon Seojin reported, "we're receiving diplomatic overtures from the hegemony of Kresh survivors, the Zalarian resistance, and at least 12 other species that were attacked by the Vorthans." Soon-ho nodded grimly. "They want to know if we're willing to help them rebuild. What should we tell them?" "Begin Phase 2, Sun-ho ordered. If the Vorthans return with reinforcements, we'll need allies. Start coordinating with the survivors. Share our defensive technologies. Help them build ships that can stand against quantum disruptors." Throughout the Sol system, massive shipyards that had been hidden beneath asteroid surfaces and within gas giant atmospheres came online. Construction crews that had been working in secret for 3 years now worked openly, building the vessels that would defend not just humanity, but every species that chose freedom over subjugation. The galaxy had learned a crucial lesson that day. Never underestimate a species that had spent millennia fighting its way to the top of its own world's food chain. Humans hadn't conquered their planet through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had done it through intelligence, adaptability, and the absolute refusal to give up when faced with impossible odds. The Vorthan Empire would return eventually with larger fleets and new weapons, but they would find the galaxy a very different place, one where their former victims had learned to fight back. The end.